There is something laid out in the DA's statement of facts here. That's the DA's document accompanying the indictment that has left me with more questions than answers. It concerns this man, former Trump Organization Chief Financial Officer Allen Weisselberg, who is currently set to be released from Rikers Island 2 weeks from today for pleading guilty to a decade-long tax evasion scheme. In exchange for a lighter prison sentence in the tax fraud trial of the Trump org last year, Weisselberg testified. He pleaded guilty, and he helped Manhattan prosecutors secure a guilty verdict on 17 tax fraud charges. He was very important in all that. Mr. Weisselberg is a key character in Trump world. He worked for the organization for nearly 50 years. The previous Manhattan DA, Cy Vance, was scrutinizing Weisselberg in connection to fraud claims levied at Trump and his organization by none other than Michael Cohen. And that vast criminal probe, the one started by Cy Vance, that appears to still be open. The New York Times reported in February that prosecutors were dangling more charges against Allen Weisselberg in an effort to get him to cooperate in the hush money payments case. That's the one Alvin Bragg issued an indictment for yesterday. It is important to remember that this larger fraud investigation is arguably a broader and more consequential investigation than the hush money payments case. It involves allegations that Trump and his business inflated and deflated assets in order to get more favorable insurance and mortgage rates. And so Weisselberg's potential criminal exposure here is very much a live issue. As it was first reported right here on this show with WNBC, Weisselberg has parted ways with the lawyers who represented him during the Trump Organization investigation. Weisselberg reportedly now has a new lawyer, someone who is also, not coincidentally, paid by the Trump Organization. If Allen Weisselberg is getting out of prison, he's getting out of Rikers in 2 weeks, why does he need a new lawyer? That news stuck out to me because, remember, in the federal probe into the hush money payments, Allen Weisselberg was granted immunity in exchange for his grand jury testimony. This is the case that resulted in Michael Cohen going to prison. But in the unsealing of the statement of facts in Alvin Bragg's case against Trump yesterday, we learned the deeper extent of Allen Weisselberg's alleged hand in that scheme. The DA lays out in detail that Weisselberg was involved in discussions about how much money to pay Stormy Daniels and how to pay her. Prosecutors lay out that Cohen spoke to Weisselberg about, quote, how to set this whole thing up, and that Allen Weisselberg played an integral role in figuring out how to reimburse Michael Cohen. The document also alleges that Weisselberg memorialized these calculations in handwritten notes on the copy of the bank statement that Michael Cohen had provided. While Allen Weisselberg is all over the statement of facts in this criminal case, why wasn't he charged? After all, the only immunity he had concerning the hush money scheme was from federal prosecutors, not the DA's office, not Alvin Bragg. So, could prosecutors use Allen Weisselberg's alleged involvement in that hush money scheme as leverage to get Allen Weisselberg to cooperate in the other, broader, and ongoing criminal investigation into Trump world? Because that would be very, very problematic for Donald Trump. Joining us now is Suzanne Craig, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter for the New York Times, and Catherine Christian, a former special assistant DA in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Thank you both for being here. Thank you for sitting with me as I went on that extended jag. And I guess, Catherine, let me start. I think I was really struck by Allen Weisselberg has loomed in the shadows as a person of great importance here. And I guess, did you think it was odd that he was so prominent in a shadowy way in that effective summary of Alvin Bragg's case?
I didn't think it was odd because it's factually accurate.
Yes.
He did all of the things. So to not include it, people who would know the facts would say, well, where was the CFO?
But to not charge him. And do you see?
And I'm not going to speculate. He's 75. He's currently in Rikers Island. He's getting out soon. He was convicted. He's already testified on behalf of the DA's office. It could be argued that he didn't testify that great. So he didn't hurt the defense. He didn't, hurt the DA's office. So I'm not going to speculate, about whether or not someone is cooperating. It does sort of, like I said, if it quacks like a duck, it looks like a duck. He does have a new attorney. He is about to get out, and he is a part of the statement of facts that were issued yesterday, but it shouldn't be surprising that he's a part of the statement of facts.
Sure. It's not so much the fact that he's included in the statement of facts, but the fact that he is in charge and that he remains a person potentially of great interest, because I would love to get your thoughts on this. This broader investigation that was begun by Cy Vance is not over. I mean, Alvin Bragg's office has been very clear that it's ongoing.
And people don't believe that, but they should. So people who are upset yesterday, and I'm not talking about people who are politically upset, who said, that's all there is, this is the entire case. You know, I have said, it's not over yet. You know, the investigation is continuing. Just wait, just wait. There might be another chapter. So, and I think there will be another chapter, and it's an investigation. So clearly the DA's office is not going to talk about a pending investigation, but I think there will be more to come.
How do you read all of this, Suzanne, in terms of the case that was laid out yesterday in the context of a potentially broader investigation that was continued from Cy Vance?
The Weisselberg thing is really important, and I think you can kind of feel the heat in his cell right now in Rikers. He is not going to walk out of Rikers and just have this end. I think what prosecutors are looking to do is he's got 2 more weeks left, and he is potentially facing insurance fraud charges that could be brought against him. And I think they're using the pressure of that to get him to cooperate, not just on the larger case that we've talked about the valuations, where the Trump organization, when they need that loan, they go high on valuations, and when they're going to the tax man, they go low. They very much want his cooperation on that. I believe that they're working on that. But secondly, I believe, depending how things go for Allen Weisselberg, if there is a level of cooperation, you could see him as a witness in the Stormy Daniels case. We don't know right now where things are at. The Trump organization is paying his bills, but he is 75 years old, and I just don't think any of us can really, except for him, understand the effect of he would be doing if the insurance case goes ahead against him, where he was, it involves Zurich.
Yeah,
it's theft over $1 million. It is hard time, and I think he's just got some hard decisions to make right now about what he's going to do. But I wouldn't necessarily, I'm not going to, if I was betting, I'm not sure I would bet we're going to see him in the Stormy Daniels case, but I don't think that the odds are low. But I think his cooperation in that other case, which is very significant, where they were filing false bank records, and I think that's where they really want his cooperation right now.
And I think it's important to say there's more. I mean, there really appears to be more going on here than I think people are potentially giving the DA credit for at this stage of the game.
Oh, I definitely.
In terms of investigations.
And that's why it's frustrating sometimes to watch, because there's not just more going on with the Manhattan DA. You've got all these other cases going on around the country, and I think when we look back and we judge this, we're going to sort of forget all the daily debate about the merits of this single case, because it's going to fit into a larger picture.